everyone. Happy Wednesday. I am joining you live today with my youngest. This is Eleanor. She is 6 months old and she just wasn't ready to take a nap. So she's hanging out with me today for this topic that I'm really excited to chat about, and that is phrases that we can say to our children that help support a positive relationship with food. Hi, Steph. Thanks so much for joining. And if you're joining live today, thank you so much for being here. Please feel free to answer or ask any questions. You can just put them in the comment box, and I would love to answer any questions you might have as we go through this topic. And hopefully Eleanor stays occupied here and we'll try to get through this. So this is something that I think is really important as parents, because oftentimes we say things to our kids about food or eating that's really well intentioned, but it can oftentimes communicate a negative message to our children about food or eating or their bodies. And, you know, like I said, a lot of these phrases that we might say to our kids, we oftentimes just don't know, we don't know any better. And I hope anyone who's listening, takes this with a lot of grace and realizing that feeding our kids is a big responsibility and it's a big task, and there's not a whole lot of resources and support out there. So it's a learning experience, and as parents, we're learning as we go. And if you're learning and trying to do the best you can, give yourself a lot of grace through the process, because feeding our kids is not an easy task. But today I really want to focus on the things that we say to our kids that can sometimes evoke a negative response in them. And we may not see that necessarily, but it can absolutely impact how our children feel about food and eating and their bodies. So, for example, I'm just naming off a couple general phrases that we can say commonly to our kids as parents when it comes to eating. So, have you ever said something like this to your kids? Like, no, you can't eat that. Or try at least one bite first. It's really good for you. Or you should stop eating so much of that because it's not good for you. Or if you don't stop doing that, you won't get, and you can fill in the blank, you won't get ice cream tonight, or you won't get cookies, or whatever it is, whatever that special food is. And it's really easy to use food like that with our kids, but what might those phrases be communicating? And that's where I want to encourage you as a parent to kind of take a step back and think, what am I really telling my child when I'm telling them those things, And a lot of the times it really goes back to the feeding relationship we have with our child. So feeding our child is so much more than just about the food. It has to do with how we feed them. It has to do with the environment. And it really is a relationship. It's a relationship that forms between us and our children around food. And that can make it feel really overwhelming. But the good thing is that, like any relationship, with time and nurturing and care, you can build a really positive feeding relationship between you and your child. And that a lot of that has to do with how we communicate to them about food and eating. And so I'm going to share 5 really key phrases that I think are important ways to talk to your kid about food and eating. And the great thing about these phrases are that they can be applied essentially to any age. So no matter how old your kid is, you can still start using these phrases, which is great. Oh, Steph, I know you're saying I've said every one of them. I think all of us have. And even for me as a dietitian, you know, with 5 kids, I think for me, I've learned so much through all of my experiences raising my own children. So don't be too hard on yourself. And like I said, the great thing about this is that you can keep learning and you can start differently at any time. And so let's talk about some of these positive phrases that you can say to your kids. And hopefully little Eleanor makes it through. I think she is getting tired. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy these and put them in the comments so that you can see them as we're going through them. So first phrase that I love to say or encourage parents to say while Eleanor pulls my hair out. And that is, we can have more of that soon. So I'm putting that in the comments. So this is a really good phrase to say when you have a child who might be really eager about eating a certain food. It can be anything. It could be dessert. It could be, you know, I don't know. It could be anything. A common one is dessert, right? Like candies, desserts, all those cereals that you don't want to buy, those are all within eyesight of your children at the supermarket, right? Or the store. And kids can ask that all the time. Can we have this? Can I have more of that? Or they might get a special treat like ice cream or something that your family may not have all the time. And as soon as they finish it, they may be asking for more. Can I have more? Can I have more? And rather than saying, no, we can't have more of that, I really encourage parents to say, we can have more of that soon. And the difference between that is that you're ensuring your child that there will always be food in their future. And the reason that's important is that you want to help prevent this scarcity mindset in your child. So what that means is, you know, you don't want your child to feel like, oh my gosh, that was the last time I'll ever have X, Y, or Z, you know, ice cream, cookies, cake. And when children feel that scarcity mentality around certain foods, they're more likely to overeat those foods or even binge on those foods when they do have access to them. So again, rather than saying, no, that's it, we're done, or however you might phrase it, you know, I try to make it more of a positive thing and remind them that yes, we can have more of that soon. It doesn't mean right that second or right that moment, but you know, we will have it again soon. And if they're really insistent and they want to know when or how soon, you know, just keep reminding them that it's available. It will be available again at some time. And you can even say, we'll have it again, you know, tomorrow at lunch, or we'll have it again at dinner tonight, you know, whatever it is that you need to do. I know, mamas. To help your child, again, not fall into that scarcity mentality when it comes to eating certain foods. You can see here I have a little thumb sucker. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions about that one. Okay, the second phrase, and this is personally one of my favorites because I literally say it to my kids all the time. I probably sound like a broken record to them, but that is reminding them that they don't have to eat. Or just telling them you don't have to eat. And the reason this phrase is important is because it reminds them that meal times are low pressure, and ultimately you want your meal times to be low pressure. You don't want your child to feel forced to eat anything. Ultimately that really backfires. And you know, you want to remind them that they can listen to and trust their little bodies. So this is a perfect phrase to say on repeat if you have a child that just complains about anything that you put on the table and you just feel like, I cannot please this child. Are there any moms like that? So, you know, rather than getting on their level and getting in an argument with them or trying to get them to eat certain foods that you're serving, all you have to do is just tell them, you don't have to eat that. you don't even have to eat, and just leave it at that and don't even get into a discussion with them. And it's amazing how kids respond to that. It's like, oh, sometimes I think they test us and they really kind of try to see where they can push our buttons. So by reminding them that they have a choice, that they don't have to eat, they don't have to take so many bites of their vegetables in order to get dessert. That's a really important thing for your child to understand, and that is going to help them really feel more autonomous in their food decisions, which ultimately will make them feel more free to try different things, which is what we want. So hopefully that one makes sense too. You don't have to eat that. Okay, so my third phrase that I think is important, and I'm just putting these in the comments, so thanks for bearing with me, is listen to your body. And, again, you want to adjust this depending on the age of your child, but sometimes kids are so used to adults telling them, you need to eat this much, or you need to have so many bites of this, that they kind of shut down their own intuitive instincts for eating. Or you may have a child that just seems unsure about how much to eat, or maybe overeats at times. But again, we don't want to intervene with that. We want to just gently guide them and remind them that they can listen to their own body as a guide for how much food they need. And this is so key for setting up a successful eater, for setting up a child, and encouraging and empowering your child to ultimately be an intuitive eater and listen to their body and not listen to external rules. Because that is what is going to form a healthy relationship with food and their bodies growing up, is when they can ultimately learn and trust that they can listen to their body. And this phrase can open up a lot of good discussion too. And remember, you want to keep things really neutral. So, if your child is like, how much did I eat, or did I eat too much? And always kind of reflect that question back to your child and ask them, are you listening to your body? How does your body feel? I think I mentioned this on a video before, but my 4-year-old, Madeline, will always tell us about her tummy. She'll say, my tummy doesn't want any more of that. And so, kind of adapt it to whatever language your child best understands. But the bottom line, and ultimately the point of this, is that you are encouraging them to listen and tune into their own instincts, which they have. All kids do. Unless there is some kind of, medical issue. But generally speaking, kids are born with an intuitive ability to gauge their own hunger and fullness levels. All right, so hopefully that's all making sense. So my fourth one, I'm just moving along right here. Let me check the comments really quick. Steph, you said, oh, that's so good to hear. So you're just mentioning how your daughter's feeling more aware of how her body is feeling, and I think that's awesome. And sometimes it's a trial and error for kids. Like sometimes we do have to let them kind of figure it out on their own. And for some kids, that may mean overeating at meals sometimes. You want to talk to? What do you want to say? But ultimately, I think respecting their ability to do that for themselves is really what's going to help them learn what feels good in their body, what doesn't feel good, and they will learn off of those experiences and learn how to troubleshoot the next time they eat, which is great. Thanks for sharing that, Steph. Okay, so my daughter is pulling my hair out. All right, so my fourth phrase that I love to say to my kids, and this one is always a work in progress, especially over the summer because, they're home all the time and so they're around the kitchen. But the fourth phrase that I like to remind them of is the kitchen is closed until, and we can say, until snack time or until dinner time or whenever the next time is that you're planning on offering food. And the reason this is important is because kids do need structure and boundaries when it comes to their meals and when it comes to food and eating. And this phrase may seem counter to some of the other phrases that we've talked about, but remember, as parents, it's our responsibility to determine when we're offering our children food and and what we're offering them. So this falls under our responsibility, where it's our job as parents to determine when we're offering our child food. And ideally, you want to be offering food frequently enough so that they're not like scrounging in the kitchen and, hungry and needing food. I like to recommend offering your child a meal or a snack about every 3 to 4 hours, more on the shorter side, especially if you have little ones with tiny tummies. But if your child is asking for food in between those times, you just want to gently remind them that the kitchen's closed. And I think that really helps them develop good boundaries around food and around eating. Sometimes kids wander into the kitchen out of boredom. Sorry, I'm going to adjust myself so that this little one is happier. Okay. And now I'm doing this way. So I hope that makes sense. So just remember, you want to help your child establish good boundaries around food and around eating. You don't want food to feel like a free-for-all for them. Otherwise, that can make food more chaotic. So, just reminding them, if they're constantly asking you for food between the designated meals and snack times that you have, just gently remind them, the kitchen's closed right now, but we're going to be opening up the kitchen again, at 3 p.m. for our snack, or however you need to say it to your child so that they understand. All right, hopefully that one makes sense. All right, and we are going to go over one last phrase, and then I probably have to jump off and put this little one to sleep because I think she's ready for her nap now. Okay, so the 5th phrase, I'm putting it in the comments, is telling your child, yes, so we can have that. So I like to use this phrase when you have a child who is really interested in trying something. And it could be something they see at the store. It could be something that they see a friend at school has. And, kids are curious and they're learning how to eat. And part of learning how to eat is being exposed to different foods. And sometimes as parents, we might feel uncomfortable about our kids having certain things, or feel like maybe they're having too much dessert or too much sweets. But again, this kind of goes back to the first phrase that I said. We don't want to create that scarcity mindset for our child. And by telling them, if we tell them, no, we're not going to have that, or that's bad for you, instead of saying something like that, we want to remind them that, yes, that we can try different things. And by doing that, we're helping remind them that all foods are safe to eat. And that's really important for preventing picky eating or disordered eating in children. We want to remind them that all foods are safe. And sometimes when we shut our child down right away when they're asking to try something, like if they are excited about trying a different candy or cookie and we shut them down right away and say, no, we can't have that. Or it's easy to say negative things about foods that we don't want them to eat. But again, remember that can create the idea that certain foods are unsafe, and it makes them even more special in their mind. And then they're going to be thinking about them and feeling more obsessive about them. So rather than kind of pushing them in that direction, be open with your child and exploring it with them and asking them, yeah, we can try that sometime. And this doesn't mean that you're going to cater to every single thing that your kid wants, because that's not realistic either. but you're just kind of leaving it open-ended. You're exploring, what they're excited to try, because all kids, kids have their own food preferences just like we do as adults. So we want to honor that, and we want to take their wants and likes into consideration when we're planning our meals and our menus for them. So I hope that helps a little bit. I know it can be hard. And again, like I said, oftentimes many of the phrases and things that we say to our children, they come from a place of good intention. But sometimes if you find yourself saying things to your child, kind of take that as an opportunity to reflect where it might be coming from. Sometimes as adults or as moms, there are certain things that make us uncomfortable about eating. Maybe you grew up in a home where desserts were really limited, or you weren't allowed to eat certain things. And so that plays a part in how you are feeding your own child and the way you're communicating to your child about food. So just kind of take that opportunity, instead of being hard on yourself, really kind of take an opportunity to explore maybe why you say some of the things you do to your own children. And, do you have a history of distrusting yourself around eating certain foods? Or, there's a lot of different questions that you can think about in that scope. But ultimately, just remember that as parents, we're the gatekeepers of food to our children. And making these small little changes in the ways that we communicate to them about food and eating and their bodies can actually make a big impact, and a positive impact, in how we nurture their own relationship with food and their bodies. So I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you so much for those of you who were able to join in. I can see Eleanor didn't make it. She fell asleep, so I'm going to go put this little girl down. But before I leave, I am just going to put a link in here to a blog post that I wrote that talks about these exact statements that I just went over, and it kind of goes into it in a little more detail. So if you're interested in reading more, please feel free to check out the blog. I posted it in the comments. And any questions that you have as you watch this video, please feel free to put them in the comments. I'll be coming back and checking them. Steph, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. And I want to make these Facebook Lives as helpful as possible for you as parents. Like I said, feeding our kids is a big task and responsibility. So if you ever have any questions or topics that you'd like me to cover, please feel free to add in those suggestions as well. All right, I am wishing you all a beautiful rest of your week. And thanks again for joining me, and I will hopefully get to see you all soon. Bye.